Arcfieldweather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Thursday afternoon, January the 30th. Quite an interesting and active weather pattern setting up across the nation over the next 10 to 14 days or so. This is quite an interesting time of the year with respect to the weather. We have still some very cold air positioned across the North Arctic air into Canada, into the northern part of the U.S. And at the same time, over the next few weeks, we'll be experiencing increasing amounts of warm and humid air down across the southern states. Of course, the strength of the sun is increasing as we progress through the month of February, and that oftentimes leads to quite a clash in the atmosphere across the nation with that cold air, cold, dense air positioned to the north and the warmer, increasingly humid air down to the south. This is the probability outlook for some severe weather later today and tonight by NOAA's Storm Prediction Center, and indeed it has a chance, at least a slight chance, of some severe thunderstorm activity places like eastern Texas, Louisiana, into Mississippi. This same area, by the way, was very cold with a lot of snow just a week or a week and a half or so ago. This is kind of a harbinger of things to come as we progress into February and through the month of February. Again, we oftentimes have increasingly warm and humid air flowing northward from the Gulf region into the south central U.S. At the same time, we still have residual cold air masses up across the northern states, leading to quite an active weather pattern indeed. We'll see severe weather start to play a bigger and bigger role as we go through the month of February and certainly into the month of March. Now let's take a look at the very latest GFS model run. This is the 12Z model run. I wanted to update things with the very latest information here. And this is the forecast map of total snowfall amounts over the next 10 days. Indeed, we have a battle setting up, kind of a very strong frontal boundary zone that will extend from the west to the east during much of next week. Eventually, I think the colder air will win out across much of the eastern two-thirds of the nation, maybe after that 10-day period or so. But for the next week or so, we will have a kind of a constant battle between the cold, dense Arctic air to the north and increasingly warm and humid air down to the south. And it's kind of reflected in this forecast map of snowfall over the next 10 days with that cold air positioned up to the north and warmer, more humid air down to the south. All the snow accumulations basically in the cold air, of course, over the next 10 days or so. These are oftentimes some difficult storms to forecast because any kind of a shift in this frontal boundary zone that will be setting up right in this region right here, any kind of a shift to the north or to the south can have big implications on a particular area. And we'll kind of talk about that as we talk about a storm system by the middle part of next week. Well, let's start off here by looking at the North America view of the 500 millibar height anomaly forecast maps. Again, we're using the very latest 12Z run of the GFS. Certainly no high latitude blocking to speak of across Canada or Greenland as we begin the day here on Thursday, January 30th. But a couple things I want to point out in the longer term. Again, I think colder air eventually wins out here over the next, after let's say 10 days or so out, maybe February 10th and later. By that I mean cold air will become more widespread over the central and eastern states after about February 10th or so. Between now and then, a big battle zone will be setting up across the middle part of the nation. Now let's move forward here, and we have again a lot of lower heights than normal, lower pressures than normal up across Canada. Not your typical high latitude blocking pattern by any means. Here we go into the upcoming weekend, and notice strong ridge, strong higher heights than normal setting up over the Aleutian Islands and over Alaska here. We'll see that as we go through next week. Now this is all the way out to Monday, February 3rd. Very, very high heights relative to normal setting up over Alaska. And you can see as we go through the latter part of next week that the overall flow will start to take shape that will allow for cold air masses from way up there in northern Canada to make their way into the central and ultimately the eastern states here. Here we go all the way out to next weekend. Now this is a week from this Saturday. We're talking about February 8th, and again we still have this continuation of this Strong ridge right here over Alaska by the time we get to 10 days out. Now this is Sunday, February 9th. Super Bowl Sunday happens to be. A strong ridge over Alaska. Now what this allows, this kind of flow allows for cold air to flow all the way down into the central and ultimately into the eastern states. Again, this is about 10 days from now. We're talking about February 9th, February 10th time frame. This is the North Pole right in this region right here. So you can even envision some cross-polar flow that will allow some very cold air from way up in northern Canada, maybe even on the other side of the pole, the Siberian side of the pole, to get back into this pattern across the central and eastern U.S. Between now and then, over the next 10 days or so, there'll be quite a battle setting up across the nation with cold air to the north, across the northern states, and warm air to the south, across the southern states. And that will make each individual storm system quite difficult to forecast, as there will be a wide range of precipitation types, from rain and thunderstorms to the south to ice and snow to the north. Now let's take a look at the 850 millibar temperature anomaly forecast maps, again using the very latest 12Z run of the GFS. Notice very cold conditions here, well below normal across some of New York State and New England. That plays a big role in what should be an accumulating snow event later tonight through much of the day on Friday into Friday night, from, let's say, central New York all the way across New England. At least a few inches of snow in mind on the table here. But across the middle of the nation, a lot of warmer than normal conditions, and that kind of shifts to the east over the next 24, 48 hours or so, and then we get some colder air again returning to the northeastern quadrant of the nation later this weekend. And then we have some very cold air starting to show up here. This is way below normal, some 20, 25 degrees below normal air by the end of the upcoming weekend, the early part of next week, showing up across the southwestern part of Canada, starting to spill into the northern plains at this particular time. Now here we go into, let's say, Tuesday of next week, and just look at this battle zone area right in here, where we have a lot of cold air to the north and warm air to the south, and this is that frontal boundary zone that will be very critical exactly where that sets up. Again, there's a strong temperature gradient in this area right here, and a little shift to the north or a little shift to the south of that frontal boundary zone can have a big impact on a particular area when moisture flows northward. Now let's continue to move forward here in time into the middle part of next week, and indeed there will be a lot of moisture at this particular time flowing out of the Gulf region into the Tennessee Valley, headed towards that colder air to the north and east. And we'll see the surface forecast maps in a moment. A lot of colors showing up, meaning snow, sleet, freezing rain, and rain, all as a function of this battle zone region here with the colder air to the north and warmer air to the south. Now let's move forward in time. Maybe even get the surge of warm air to making it all the way up into New England later next week. But then looking upstream here, all of Canada by the end of next week, this is next Friday, February 7th, showing below normal temperatures here, and that ultimately, according to this GFS model run, kind of overwhelms the overall pattern here. Again, this is 10 days out now, Super Bowl Sunday. Much of the eastern half of the nation looking colder than normal at this particular time, with some warmer conditions, warmer than normal, hanging on across the southwestern states. Well, let's wrap up with the surface forecast maps from the 12Z GFS model run. A lot of rainfall this morning and into the afternoon across the Tennessee Valley here, parts of the south central states. A lot of moisture flowing north out of the Gulf into that part of the nation, and some of this can end up producing severe thunderstorm activity later today into tonight. Places like Louisiana, eastern Texas, even parts of Mississippi. Do not expect a widespread severe weather outbreak, but this is kind of a harbinger of things to come during February, especially later February into March. Now, this area of moisture will push to the north and east, and some precipitation will break out late tonight, early early tomorrow morning in the Mid-Atlantic region. It could be cold enough for some of that rain to freeze in some surfaces, let's say to the north and west of Philly, to the north and west of New York City, certainly Allentown, Scranton, all those areas up at central, east central, and northeastern PA. Ice is on the table here at the onset of this storm system here, late tonight, early tomorrow. But then it ultimately becomes a rain event, certainly from New York City down to Philly, down to DC. We're talking about rain late tonight and on Friday. And by the way, January has been a much drier than normal month in places like DC, Philadelphia, New York City, some of those areas with a deficit of total precipitation of more than a couple of inches. This system may produce, let's say, a half an inch to 3/4 of an inch in the I-95 corridor region. Now, notice up to the north here, let's say central New York State into central New England. Cold enough for snow, cold enough for accumulating snow, at least a few inches on the table. Central New York into much of New England going through the day on Friday into Friday night. That pulls away. We have a moderately cold air mass that pushes into the northeastern states over the upcoming weekend. And then there'll be another system to watch, let's say Sunday night, early Monday time frame, that could throw some snow back into the cold air. New York State, New England, maybe even upstate PA at the end of the weekend, early part of next week. And then we start to get that battle showing up here. And I've mentioned in prior video discussions that these dashed lines here represent lines of thickness, what we call the thickness layer in that lowest half of the atmosphere from the surface up to the 500 millibar level. Blue lines in general represent colder air, and the red lines warmer air. So you have this kind of battle zone area, this dividing line here, this frontal boundary zone right in this region right here by early Tuesday of next week, with cold air up to the north, warm air down to the south. And by the way, this cold air is anchored here by a very strong high pressure system over southwestern Canada at this particular time. So let's kind of move forward here and watch the evolution of this. And here we go. We start to get kind of a backflow of moisture coming out of the Gulf region into the Tennessee Valley by the middle part of next week. Now, keeping in mind that this whole area right here shows some very cold air by the middle part of next week. And when I see a high pressure like this centered over New England, it tells me this cold air will be rather reluctant to give up its ground Wednesday night time frame. Meantime, you have this moisture starting to break out, starting to flow to the north and east. But since you have that high right there, as indicated by this particular model run, that cold air certainly across the northeastern states will be very reluctant to give up its ground. So by the time you get to Wednesday night, early Thursday time frame, you're seeing lots of colors on the map here. Lots of colors this time of the year is not necessarily a good thing. We have snow shown in blue, sleet in purple, freezing rain in the pink, and then your ordinary plain rain shown in green here. So this is next Wednesday night, Thursday time frame, and this will have to be closely watched over the next several days, because any kind of a shift to the north or south of this particular frontal boundary zone could have a big difference on a particular location. As it stands right now, a good chance for a decent ice event, at least in portions of the northeastern part of the nation, by the middle part of next week. Then we move forward in time, and even some heavy rain, maybe some strong thunderstorms in the warm sector here by next Thursday. This is a week from right now. We're talking about next Thursday the 5th, and then we get into the end of the week, Thursday the 6th, and then we get into the end of the week, February 7th. And it is at this time that this very, very strong high out across the western part of Canada starts to kind of dominate the scene here, and we start to see cold air pretty much taking over the eastern half of the nation. And here's that 540 line right here now, diving all the way down into the southern states by the time we get to Sunday, February 9th, is Super Bowl Sunday, 10 days from right now. So it's at this time that you have some cold air starting to kind of overspread the pattern here, kind of taking over the central and eastern states. Again, this is about 10 days out, but between now and then, looks like we'll have a battle between that cold, dense Arctic air to the north and warmer, increasingly humid air down to the south, and it could make for quite a messy wintry scene by the middle part of next week, with everything from snow and ice to rain and thunderstorms. Again, that's the middle part of next week. And with that high pressure starting to really form over Alaska 7 to 10 days out, that looks like it allows for this possibility that cold air will move from northern Canada all the way into the central and eastern states, let's say around February 8th, 9th, 10th time frame and beyond. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, this has been meteorologist Paul Dorian.